We've talked some about the NBA bubble drama, and there continues to be a lot of drama surrounding everything in college football. And in particular, yesterday, there was a lot more discussion about spring football for the Big Ten and for the Pac-12, and also the question of what in the world might happen with the college football playoff. And in particular, Jeff Brohm, the Purdue head football coach, came out with a plan that would lay out basically what his basic structure would be. And basically, he sent this to a bunch of different media members and everything else. And the challenge in general is I don't find any way that if you care about player health, spring football is a viable option at all. Okay? And look, I understand some people don't care about player health at all, but I think this thing is going to blow up really quickly in terms of actually happening, which is why I've been arguing and why I feel so bad for Big Ten and Pac-12 fans. You can't cancel the fall. You cannot cancel the fall college football season and expect for there to be a spring at all. That's the argument that I was making to you guys for a long time when I came out and I said in a straightforward manner, hey, here's the deal. If you cancel the fall, you are basically saying college football is not going to come back until the fall of 2021. So you're going to be sitting out for an entire year, and it's going to create all different sorts of major issues. But let's just talk about this idea of spring football in general. For those of you out there who haven't paid attention, so the idea that Jeff Brohm floated, and by the way, I don't begrudge anybody trying to figure out creative ways to deal with a situation with the coronavirus that there is no precedent for. So let me just tell you that on the upfront. I applaud Jeff Brohm for trying to be creative and trying to find a way to make something happen in terms of allowing these guys to play football. Here are the challenges that I see that are particularly difficult about spring football. First of all, and right now it's only the Pac-12 and the Big Ten that would be potentially trying to do this. First of all of your best players aren't going to play. Okay? And that needs to be like the number one line. So if you are Justin Fields, let's say, who is Ohio State's quarterback, there is, I believe, a 0% chance that he plays spring football for Ohio State. If you are in any way a player who has any expectation whatsoever of being drafted, and I believe there were 40 Big Ten players drafted in the 2020 draft. Dub, look that up, actually. Look up how many Big Ten and Pac-12 players there were who were drafted, if you would, and let me know. Because all of those guys, if I am advising them, there is nearly a 0% chance that they play. Nearly a 0% chance that any top player at all make the decision to play. In fact, some top college football players are deciding not to play even if the fall season is going to happen in the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. All of those guys who are theoretically going to get drafted are not playing. So right off the front, you are probably going to, I think it's around 70 or 80 guys, you're just completely taken out of the roster. There is no chance that anybody who has a chance to play. And in the last year, in 2020, according to Dub, 48 Big Ten players were drafted, 32 from the Pac-12. So my numbers were pretty close. 80 guys, effectively, you're taking off the top, right off the top, that are very unlikely to play. You say, why? Well, because the NFL Combine is the holy grail for these guys in terms of having a chance to get drafted. The NFL Combine right now happens at the end of February, running right into the beginning of March sometimes. Well, you can say, oh, well, the NFL could back that up. Well, if the NFL backs up the Combine, you're talking about guys getting their bodies physically beaten up, playing a spring schedule, and then suddenly they're going to show up, try to go through all the Combine drills without a couple of months to get in shape and train for them. I'm just telling you, there is no way that anybody who has a realistic chance in the NFL is risking their bodies on a spring football season. Okay? So that is number one. And I also don't really think the NFL is going to adjust their schedule at all for college football because the guys who run NFL teams want to be able to conduct their interviews. They want to be able to see all these guys at the combine. They want to be able to have their normal schedule as it pertains to the NFL draft taking place. I just don't see in any way that the NFL is going to adjust their schedule in any substantial way. Okay? So number one is, for me, when I look at spring football, all of the best players are not going to play. So the overall quality of play is going to be low. The other thing is, you're bringing in a lot of kids out of high school that arrive around January. Are you going to play high school kids in college football games? It seems crazy to me. The bigger issue here, so number one is the quality of players are not going to be very good. Their replacements are going to be super young and not have played hardly at all, some of whom will have just played high school football. Number two, you are requiring this spring football to happen when the weather is atrocious in the Big Ten and when the cold and flu season is typically at its peak. Let's say you play in January, February, March, which is a tough turnaround, but let's say you do that. That's the earliest you could play. That's when the virus, if we have a quote-unquote second wave, is going to be at its absolute apex. So the chances of there being a lot of safety here is very, very low. Also remember that if you start early, as Jeff Brohm wants to do, you're talking about having your guys in camp all through Christmas. Does that seem very fair to basically take away all these guys from their family and what would ordinarily be Christmas time and allow them to be in a training session? It doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. So the timing of the spring, if anything, is more dangerous. Remember, we're talking about conference play beginning in late September. It's nearly October, and suddenly things are going to be infinitely better by December, and you're going to be able to play. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. If you can play in January, you should be able to play in late September or early October, which is certainly an option that the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 are taking. Finally, you want to talk about health. The players that are left are going to get their bodies absolutely crushed in playing a spring college football season, having a couple of months off, and then immediately coming back in and playing a fall football season. They are going to be playing more games than the top NFL teams play, and it is an absolutely brutal schedule to try to follow, especially when, again, all of the top players, you're talking about 80 of them probably, maybe more, guys who feel like they have a chance to get drafted. You might have 100 guys on in the Big Ten and in the Pac-12 who are deciding to sit out. And you may have a lot of guys who say, hey, I'm fine playing in the fall, but I don't want to play a spring football season because what am I really playing for? I just don't think there's a very strong argument at all for spring football being a viable option. And moreover, if you believe that spring football is a legitimate possibility, to me what should happen is you should go back and reassess why you are shutting down. Because if you think it's going to be safe, as Jeff Brohm does, to play football on Big Ten campuses in January, why is it not safe to play in October? There's no logical consistency there. If you're concerned about player health in late September and early October, why do you think things are suddenly going to be better in January? It just doesn't make sense. Now, some of you are like, well, there'll be a vaccine. I hope we get a vaccine soon, and I hope it works 100%, and I hope we have no issues with it at all. But the people who get the vaccine are not going to be college football players. We're not going to go out and suddenly vaccinate the youngest and the most healthy of the population. The vaccine is going to go to elderly people who are dying at much higher rates from the coronavirus. So this idea in general that anything's going to be different in the spring is just fundamentally wrong. And I think if you look at the data in the Sun Belt, in the South in particular, the overall number of infections are declining pretty rapidly. There's good early data out of Alabama where 99% plus of the students that they're all testing have not had the coronavirus. We had the numbers come out of Notre Dame where hardly anybody has it. If they do a decent job of controlling this in some way on campus when it's still super warm and people are outside a lot in the early fall, in August and September on these college campuses, I don't think you can eradicate the virus completely, but I do think the overall infection rate can be managed on college campuses, and that's in the early fall. I think in the winter when everybody goes inside is when the danger would really exist. And this goes to my number one issue with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 deciding to shut down. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can open up college campuses, how you can allow kids out there to go to class, to live in dorms, to eat in student cafeterias, to do all of those things, and how you can allow athletes to continue to train for 20 hours a week in the weight room, running routes, doing drills associated with their sport, and then you're taking the games away from them. The idea that there's going to be much transmission from the games themselves seems to me to be very, very low. So whatever fears you have, this does not seem like a logical decision that is being made by the Big Ten and the Pac-12. I think they gave in to fear porn, and I think the idea that they're going to play in spring is very unlikely. But if they are going to play in the spring, then I think it reinforces the fact that the decision to cancel in the fall was the wrong one. Because if you can play in January, why can't you play in October and November? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. I just think I applaud Jeff Brohm for trying to think creatively at Purdue and come up with a way to play college football. But I think his plan just further elucidates the errors and logical fallacies that are involved in the decision-making that came from the Big Ten and the Pac-12 leaders.